I've been saying all offseason that North Carolina needs to add at least one more player in the front court this offseason through the transfer portal. And there was a very unique front court player that joined the portal on Tuesday of this week, North Dakota State's Grant Nelson. But is he a good fit for this year's Carolina team?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Thursday, May 4th, 2023. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I am your host, Isaac Schade, and I want to thank you so much for joining us, especially those of you everydayers who are here with us every day. It's great to be with you again. Coming up on the show today, we got some potential Carolina basketball schedule updates. We'll get to that, but we want to look at Grant Nelson. As always, like I like to do with these transfer potentials, making the case against and making the case for, and then talking more about it. But before we get into him, I do need to issue a quick apology for yesterday's show. I misspoke in the cold open. I started by saying that Trey Alexander from Creighton was in the transfer portal. I intended to say that he is in the NBA draft, but there was a rumored connection between he and Carolina. So if you listened later in the day, it might have already been fixed. We went back and added a new cold open to it and did that. Same thing with the audio downloads, but if you had downloaded it earlier, you might hear that original cold open. So if you hear me say that Trey Alexander's in the transfer portal, ignore that. My bigger point was really to just have a conversation about should Carolina add any more backcourt players or not. And so that was what that conversation was about. So anyway, just wanted to make sure to clear that up and that everyone had heard that. Listen, with all these names and decisions and transfer portal this and all that floating around, even I get it mixed up sometimes, and it's my job to stay on top of it. So I'm always trying to do my best, and that's why I want to make sure to clear it up and that we are not spreading misinformation. I always want to try to give you the very best truth. And then when I mess up, because we're all human, I promise you, I will always let you know. Okay? Deal? Deal. Let's get into Grant Nelson. North Dakota State transfer has just finished his third year for the Bison. By the way, I want to shout out our guy Scott Carpenter and others for pointing this out. But I mentioned Scott by name because he had been on it a while ago. Like, hey, watch out for this guy who's popping. So Scott, thanks for reaching out with all that. Again, as I said in the cold open, we've talked a lot about the desire for one of Carolina's two final scholarships to go to a front court player. Could Nelson be that guy? That's what we're going to explore today. And then once we've gone through the case against and the case for, I'll let you know where I stand on Grant Nelson as of now, which, by the way, I know another Grant Nelson, and he is to think of that Grant Nelson as an elite basketball player, it's pretty funny. So anyway, that keeps coming to my head as we have this conversation. So Grant Nelson entered the portal on Tuesday after 3 years in North Dakota State. So obviously has his senior year left. And just like all the other rising seniors, is the part of the last class that has a year of COVID eligibility. So if he wants, he actually has 2 years left in school. But in addition to joining the transfer portal, he had also previously entered his name into the NBA draft, where he projects as, if he stays in, if he gets drafted, it would be somewhere in the second round. So that's kind of where things stand right now in the NBA draft, testing the waters, also in the transfer portal. Now, let me say this off the top. I have heard nothing about Carolina contacting him. Any list I've seen of who has reached out to Grant Nelson does not include the Tar Heels. So I am in no way saying that North Carolina has contacted him. They might have, and it's just playing, as we often say, playing it close to the vest, and we just don't know about it. But I just want to make that disclaimer off the top. A big part of having this conversation is because approximately 837 people have reached out to me over the last 48 hours to ask about Grant Nelson. And so I just thought it would be appropriate for us to have a conversation about him today. Seriously, there is this massively long list of schools who have been reported to reach out. You ready? Here's the list of what I've found. Kentucky, Gonzaga, Kansas, Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Texas Tech, Houston, St. John's, LSU, UCF, Miami, Florida State, Villanova, Nebraska, Georgetown, Cal, Baylor. Man, I felt like an auctioneer. But I give you that entire list to say everyone is checking in on this dude. And that alone tells you something. So let's get into it. Per North Dakota State's roster last year, he's 6'11", 235, is from North Dakota. So he would be leaving the state. Fills up the stat sheet like a baller. 17.9 points last year, led his team. 9.3 boards last year, led his team. 63 total assists, led the team. It was 2.1 per game. 50 blocks, led the team. That was 1.7 per game. 23 steals, most on the team, 0.8 per game. Career high 36 points for him in his 3 years at North Dakota State. So this dude can do a little bit of everything. By the way, something I would not want to do that he does, homie is one of 9 kids, has 4 brothers, 4 sisters. No, thank you. No way. Anybody part of a big family out there, sell me on the merits of it. I am an only child, and I wish I had a brother or sister or 2, but not 8 more. Yowza. That's crazy. Okay. Anyway, one of the things, as you know, that I like to do when we talk about these is weigh the pros and cons. Usually I like to start with the yes and then go to the no, but we're going to flip it up today. We're starting with the no. So why no? Let me give you a couple reasons why he might not be a fit for North Carolina. Carolina needs another front court player, in my estimation, and a lot of yours, I know from having conversations with you. Yes, true. And that is somebody who is one of 2 things. Either preferably a strong stretch 4 or a 5 that doesn't mind coming in to back up Armando Bacot and be behind him. Now, that said, I'm of the mind that Carolina might have that already in Jalen Washington. I don't think Jalen Washington has the requisite foot speed to be the 4. And I think given what we hope, the sophomore leap that he's going to make, especially with a healthy offseason, he's Armando Bacot's backup. So let's just say that. So here's the thing why maybe not with Grant Nelson. I don't think it's his goal to come in and be a backup to Armando Bacot, or maybe even a backup to Jalen Washington, who's backing up Armando Bacot. This dude is looking for starters minutes somewhere. Could he be that at the 4 for North Carolina? Perhaps. He's not a prototypical stretch 4, though. And so if that's what Hubert Davis is looking for, the answer is no. He's not the fit that you're looking for. Another thing is, listen, after Pete Nance, I'm gun shy in a big way on a power forward who doesn't consistently shoot at a higher level from outside. And I know that's not everything. I know that's not all you're looking at. But you have to be able to space the floor for Armando Bacot to have room to do what he needs to do if you're going to rely on Armando Bacot at the level I expect you to. Last year, Grant Nelson shot 26.9% from 3 on 3.1 attempts per game. For his career, 30.7% from 3 on 2.6 attempts per game. His totals last year, 25 of 93 from deep. He's never made more than 28 threes in a season. Are you okay with that? Like, are there other things he can do to offset that, to spread the floor, stretch the floor? We're going to talk about more on that, obviously, but he's less of a 3-point shooter than Pete Nance was. So if that's what you're looking for, Grant Nelson's not your guy. Now, another reason why maybe not at North Carolina, he at North Dakota State had a long leash, had a high usage rate. Had the opportunity to have many plays drawn up for him and teammates, basically doing what they needed to do to prepare him to succeed offensively. They played through him in Fargo, North Dakota consistently. The question is, would he operate as well with the lower usage rate, which he would have if he was at North Carolina? He would not be the central focus as he was at North Dakota State because of guys like RJ and Armando. And, oh, by the way, you're not going to get to run and facilitate as much as you did at North Dakota State because of RJ and because of this dude named Harrison Ingram, right? Like those are going to be probably your 2 main distributors in the starting lineup. So There's that. Why potentially not? Another thing, from everything I've watched, from scouting reports, I mean, and I've gone and watched a lot over the last 2 days on this guy to be ready to talk with you about him. He relies really heavily on his right hand, to the point that like a lot of his left hand layup, or his left side of the rim layups, I should say, are still with his right hand, or just little 2-3 footers from the left side are still with his right hand. ACC defenders are a little bit better than the Summit League. Due respect to the Summit League, but they're going to eat you up if you are just sticking to your right hand all the time. Like, just envision Virginia and Tony Bennett and how they would scheme for that. No. Speaking of, another thing that I've seen him not handle wonderfully is double teams. You know that's like, let's go back to Virginia. You know that's coming, and you got to be ready to operate quickly and decisively out of double teams. And I've seen him not do that at times. So that's a thing. One other reason why maybe not at North Carolina is he's really not that great of a defender, either as primary defender or secondary defender. And that's not a good thing. One of the things we've talked about a good bit is that Carolina has to get better defensively next season. Now, maybe the level of coaching or the scheme or other things would allow him to thrive more defensively at North Carolina. Maybe he wouldn't be as exposed as he was. I mean, he's certainly athletic enough to do what he needs to do defensively. So maybe it's just some coaching and tactics and things of that nature. But from what he did at North Dakota State, there needs to be a higher level of defensive prowess, we'll say, from him or anyone else that comes and fills. So that's the case perhaps against Grant Nelson. But friends, this dude is a baller. He's got a lot of unique stuff that he does really well. I'd love to make the case for Grant Nelson for you, as well as what might a starting lineup for the Tar Heels look like if he was part of it. We'll look at all of that in just a second. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. You looking for that delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and calories? Then you got to try the best tasting protein bar ever, Built. If you're like me and you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, then I've got just the thing for you. Try a Built Bar or a Built Puff, because they're healthy and they taste amazing. Now, what makes Built Bars and Built Puffs so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real dark chocolate. Yeah, you heard me right. I'm not joking. And they come in unbelievable flavors. I love me a good churro. I'm thinking about getting a churro truck for my birthday this year, but that's going to be super unhealthy. But a churro bar, yeah, we can do that from Built. Or chocolate peanut butter brownie. Yeah, wow, great stuff, great flavors. Moreover, I'm not sure how Built does it, but they maintain these amazing macros while still tasting wonderful. These bars only have 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, and yet amazing 17 grams of protein. Perhaps best of all, now you don't have to wait on a box to come to your door from Built.com. You can go on down to Walmart, get you a 4-count box of cookies and cream. Or if you got that big family, like maybe Grant Nelson's family needs to go to Sam's Club and get the variety 13-count box from Sam's Club. I think that's exactly what they need to do. Go get you some Built Bars and try them. You won't be disappointed, I promise you. A proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. Coming up on tomorrow's show, by the way, for all you everydayers out there, we're going to be wrapping up the week. A little bit of some sad news for Tylee Craft. Man, just hurting. Some neat work that Armando Bacot and Caleb Love are doing in the community, plus a fuller look at North Carolina's basketball schedule in terms of what we know so far. All right, let's now make the case for Grant Nelson. Why should he come to North Carolina? Well, we've already said I don't think he projects as somebody who wants to come and be a backup to Armando Bacot. And that's what he would be as a 5, right? Like, he's not taking Armando's position. That's just, it is what it is. But if the North Carolina coaching staff and if Armando and if RJ and whomever else decide that he could be a good complementary fit as a power forward, as a 4 in the starting lineup with Armando, then heck yeah, bring him on. Like, if they maybe like bring him in, if they can get a visit from him, who knows? and they test things out, and it's like, yeah, there's some good chemistry, some good complementary play between Armando and excuse me, between Armando and Grant Nelson, then let's do it. Let's make it happen. Now, next thing, this dude, I said I'm gun shy on somebody that shoots not good from three as a power forward. But here's the thing where he differentiates from Pete. Grant Nelson is much better with the ball. He's much more athletic. He can get to the rim off the dribble. He moves more like a fluid wing, a fluid three, small forward, than he does any kind of power forward. This dude can create his own shot. He can get outside the lane, get out to the 3-point line, and maybe he's not always going to hit, but he can penetrate and get to the rim just like any of the backcourt players from North Carolina. So maybe that alone is good enough to create the space that you need for Mondo to do what he needs to do. So that is a thing. Another thing, we've talked a lot about how we'd like to see Carolina get back into more of the transition game, get going back up to speed. This dude can get out and lead the break, and you don't want to get in his way because he's a great finisher at the rim. Maybe that's a win. Like another thing, after his ability to lead in the open court, his ability to score in a variety of ways, depending on who his primary defender is. For example, is it a bigger lumbering four that's on him? Great, come join me at the perimeter, and then I'm going to blow by you. You a little bit smaller than me at the four as a 6'11 guy? Cool. I'm going to take you into the post, back you down, and score, which he does, again, very efficiently in the lane. Well, so, there are these possibilities. For example, he's a better free throw shooter than Armando Bacot is. Career 72.2% on 3 attempts per game. Last year, though, it was up in terms of attempts per game to 5.2 and still maintained 72% from the free throw line. That's what we've been talking about. Could we get Armando to 70%? Grant Nelson's already there. Love that. High percentage on twos. We already talked about his ability to finish at the rim. He was over 60% on twos each of the last 2 seasons and 59% on twos for his career. A couple other good things that maybe are the yeses why Grant Nelson to North Carolina. He doesn't foul out very much at all. You need that from front court guys. Just 5 times in his career, including only once last year. And so he's a guy that you can trust to stay out of foul trouble for the most part and be on the floor. Another thing, while I talked about on the negative side, he doesn't seem to have much of a left hand. He does have some feet, man. That his footwork is really, really good. That's part of him being more of a fluid player at the power forward position. He can pivot well, just knows what he's doing with those feet. So that's a win. And then the last question with the why yes is, can he class up to the high major level from the Summit League, from North Dakota State? You remember that laundry list of schools that have already contacted him that I read you with just about everyone under the sun? They would not be contacting this dude if they didn't. That entire list, I think, was all Power 6 schools. They would not be calling him or texting him or whatever if they didn't think he could level up. So keep your eyes on that. But yes, he absolutely can. So end of the day, you want him or don't? Well, for me, there is obviously a skill set there, right? Like, this young man can do things that not a lot of other big men at his size, 6'11", can do. So it's ultimately going to come down to fit. I think he's got the requisite skill set outside of being able to shoot 3 and outside of maybe a left hand, right? Like, there are a couple things. Would he be exposed defensively, etc.? If the coaches, and if Armando, I guess, thinks he would be a good complementary fit, then get him. Now, if you're asking me to call it today, which, by the way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Grant Nelson would be a good fit or no? I would love to have him, but I personally don't see how Grant Nelson fits in the front court with Armando, or how his usage rate that he's used to at North Dakota State gels with the whole roster. One of the nice things we've said about some of these other guys that have come in through the transfer portal is they don't need a lot of shots to do what they do well. That's part of what Carolina needs to mesh well with RJ and Armando. So if you were asking me to make a call right now, like obviously if Grant Nelson wants to come, cool, you take him and you figure it out. But there are other guys that I think I would pursue over him. Now I hear it. You watch the highlights and it's immediately tantalizing because of his athleticism. Sure, I get that, absolutely. But keep in mind, highlights are a player's absolute best moments. Go check out a full game. There are times when he rushes shots. There are times when he forces it. He's going to have bad things just like he has good things. End of the day, he needs a high volume, and that's not necessarily what other players are going to get at North Carolina next year who aren't named Armando Bacot or RJ Davis. I think that's just the way of it. However, I want to play the what if he comes. And based just on the current roster at the time of this recording, what might a starting lineup with him in it look like? As we've always said, your 1 and your 5. It's RJ and Armando as it stands right now. They're both going to be starting. I just mean, might there be somebody else that comes in and plays the 1 and RJ switches to the 2? If Nelson was starting alongside Armando, obviously he's going to be the 4. And then I would foresee Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram at the 2 and 3. The question becomes, is that enough shooting? Because Harrison Ingram is not a high-level three-point shooter himself. So then do you have to consider, maybe Cormac Ryan at the 3, Simeon Wilcher at the 2, DeMarco Dunn at the 2. It couldn't be Seth Trimble in that lineup, because then you've got Seth Trimble at the 2, not a great three-point shooter. Harrison Ingram at the 3. We're hoping he will be a better three-point shooter, but, has been decent at Stanford. And then Grant Nelson, who's not proven to be a great three-point shooter. And so it does, if you have him in your starting lineup, it does limit some of what you can do offensively, especially from the outside. So that's something that you just got to keep your eyes on. But I think based on the current roster, if he was there, that's probably what a starting lineup would look like. The one that I've been saying, you just sub him for Jae'lyn Withers, but Jae'lyn Withers probably is the better three-point shooter of the two. So, these are all the things you have to mull. Well, friends, from talking player personnel to talking about who the players will be playing in basketball games, got a little bit of a scheduling update for you, but it might be different than what was originally reported. We'll get into that in just a second. All right, as Carolina has done now for many years, almost a decade, the CBS Sports Classic is coming up in December, and we finally have found out the location of that. It is my hometown, Atlanta, Georgia, projected to be Phillips Arena, where the Hawks play. Now, this was reported by R.L. Bynum, who was basically referencing somebody else who would come out with it. And that person was talking about that North Carolina would play UCLA in the CBS Sports Classic. And so then Ohio State and Kentucky. And so that's what we were seeing. That was the news that came out. But the news was really more about these games being played in Atlanta than what the matchups were. But out of it, there's actually been more conversation around the matchups and who's playing who. So it's kind of funny. So Tar Heel Times, who does a great job collating all sorts of Carolina stuff from all over the internet. They always post our Locked On Tar Heel shows. Thank you so much, Tar Heel Times. We're always so grateful for that. But anyway, Adam Lucas, who you probably know, writes beautifully written articles for the Tar Heels for GoHeels.com. Just love his work, and I'm so grateful for his words that he puts out. But because of his role, he is very much in the know on things like scheduling. So he quote tweeted the Tar Heel Times tweet sharing R.L. Bynum's story. I know that's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but you hear me. So he quote tweets it. And in quote tweeting, he says, Atlanta, yes. UCLA, not so fast. Pump the brakes, basically. Meaning, yes, these games are going to be in Atlanta, but no, the Tar Heels are not playing UCLA. So immediately, my brain starts just processing what that means, right? Okay, we're not playing UCLA, then what are we looking at? Well, obviously, there's only 4 teams in the CBS Sports Classic. It's the same for every year. Carolina, UCLA, Ohio State, and Kentucky. By process of elimination, remember Carolina played Ohio State last year in this event at Madison Square Garden. It took a Pete Nance shot. You remember? Yeah, kind of magical to help get this game to overtime and then ultimately win it. So because of that, and based on what Adam said, I'm thinking, well, then I guess it's got to be Kentucky who Carolina plays. But anyway, that was up in the air for a while. Like, well, Adam's saying this, but he's being kind of mystic or, cryptic about it. What are we talking about here? Well, when I say it was up in the air for a while, by a while, I mean like 47 minutes. And I mean that, I say like 47 minutes, but exactly 47 minutes. Because Adam tweeted what he tweeted at 3:56 Eastern time. And then 47 minutes later at 4:43 Eastern time, Armando Bacot replied to the original story with just an asterisk and then said Kentucky. So, yeah, Kentucky's the play. So North Carolina, we know, will be playing in the CBS Sports Classic. Again, we already knew that, but it will be in Atlanta. And it sounds like, if you can believe Adam and Armando, who you can always believe, then Carolina will be playing Kentucky. Now, here's what's wild to me, which, by the way, means Ohio State and UCLA will be the other pairing. We don't have the times or anything like that. Obviously, we'll be on CBS because it's their event. Now, keep in mind that kind of because of COVID and some other things, the schedule has been all sorts of jacked up. And we know, by the way, that we're going to get the schedule for at least 4 more iterations because it is signed now through 2026. So this year, 23, 24, 25, 26. So we've got at least 4 more of this event. Could get a little bit interesting, though, when UCLA comes to the Big Ten, because then you got 2 Big Ten schools in the event. So I don't know if there are contingencies in place. Haven't heard anything yet on that, if UCLA or Ohio State will be rotating out. But just some reminders about the event itself, the history. It's been going since 2014. There's only one of these 4 teams that has a winning record in the event. Yes, that's right. It's the Tar Heels. Good guess, everybody out there. Way to go. Thank you very much. The Tar Heels are 6-3 in the 9 events. Ohio State is the next best record percentage-wise, 4-4. Kentucky's 4-5, and UCLA 3-5. Now, obviously, Carolina and Kentucky, you heard me say, have each played 9 games, and Ohio State and UCLA have just played 8. That's because, remember, back in 2021, there were some COVID issues, so neither Ohio State nor UCLA played. So it was supposed to be UNC versus UCLA and Ohio State versus Kentucky, but the Tar Heels ended up playing Kentucky because of the COVID protocol stuff. And we'll just not talk about the result of that game because it didn't go well for the Tar Heels. Yikes. But here's what's weird to me about Carolina playing Kentucky this year. The first several years, there was a pretty sensible rotation. Ohio State, UCLA, Kentucky, Ohio State, and then you're thinking UCLA. But no, next was Kentucky and then UCLA. So through the first 6 years of this event, Carolina played each team twice. Made a ton of sense. And then, though, in 2020, Carolina played Kentucky again. And then in 2021, as we just talked about, Carolina played Kentucky again. Last year, Ohio State. And then, like, you expect it now to be UCLA, but no, it's going to be Kentucky again. So that means Carolina in this event has played UCLA just twice of the first 9, well, now 10 iterations of this event. Ohio State just 3 times, but now this will be the 5th time the Tar Heels have played Kentucky, meaning that they will have played Kentucky as many times as Ohio State and UCLA combined in this event. So there's that. So what that says to me is not only should Carolina be playing UCLA, but if for some reason not, it makes more sense to play Ohio State in back-to-back years than to play Kentucky again. Now, I get it. There's some TV stuff to that, and having Carolina and Kentucky playing is great for the bottom line. But if you're trying to get the round robin of this thing, you're making it even more inequitable than it already was by having Carolina and Kentucky play again. So I don't know what's going to happen, but that sounds like that's the plan for now. Now, you might be asking, hey, Isaac, that's great to know about this part of the schedule. What else do we need to know? Well, friends, you are in luck because I'm going to share with you tomorrow everything we know about the schedule so far. So that'll be part of Friday's show, and I'll share it with you then. So that's all the news that's fit for now about the Tar Heels. We talked Grant Nelson, talked a little mix up on Trey Alexander there, and obviously this update on the CBS Sports Classic. Please, if you would, go leave a review of the show on Apple Podcast Reviews or anywhere else. 5 stars. Leave some fun comments about why you enjoy Locked On Tar Heels. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Heels. You can follow me on Twitter at Isaac Schade. Email the show, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. By the way, as a reminder, we've got a mailbag coming up in just a couple weeks. So go ahead and through any of those mediums, get us questions for the show. Don't forget to subscribe, smash the like button, and leave comments. Want to remind you that it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be right back with you tomorrow, but until then, peace.